Can't see him in the crowd.
Yes. So take your seats here, and I'm going to... This is what I call a synthesis panel, where I like to say, so what, now what? And I've asked 5 of our fellow Twinians to pay attention today. So all of you are out, I'm sure, doing emails and, I don't know, reading about Taylor Swift or whatever. But the five friends up on the stage have committed to actually sitting there and paying attention with alacrity. And I've asked them to share anything they'd like to share about what they've heard today. So with that provocation, I'd like to offer or ask for a volunteer. Who would like to open with one thing that resonated with you about our session today? Okay, I'll just assign. Caleb, you go first.
Okay. All right. I came away from today similar to how I come away from lots of conversations about AI, both optimistic and inspired and terrified. I consider myself a pragmatic optimist. And for those of you who don't know me, spent 4 years running social media for President Obama, which means that a lot of how I think about technology is informed by political philosophy, social psychology, social media. And Christian's insights about how we have actually not solved the problems that technology created in society while we're trying to solve the problems of tomorrow is the thing that I keep bringing up. And I haven't heard a lot of folks trying to go back and say, wait, we social engineered in a way we weren't actually expecting. We just keep building on top of that. So when we think about generative AI, I'm like, when are we actually going to clean up the information ecosystem we have so that AI is going to generate the kinds of things we want, not the kinds of junk in the past that are creating the kind of social problems that we have?
What's one thing you recommend somebody does in order to make headway?
Oh, God. Create some Silicon Valley-based companies that aren't headed by egotistical white men.
Well, I guess, what's one thing that could actually happen, Caleb?
I think that we genuinely need some business model innovation around how we develop our information ecosystem and our social relationships. Because right now they're all based on business models that make us less connected, not more connected.
Interesting. It's sort of counterintuitive if you think about social media. Maybe it's an oxymoronic social media. Who knows? Who else has an observation? Yes, Mary Sue.
I'm going to pick up on Caleb's connection point. First of all, I love Twin Global's orchestrated serendipity, the fact that this is such an eclectic group of individuals, and that's where the sparks fly, both whether it's at a table conversation or responding to a panel. And I was thinking about all of the technology-enabled transformations that are out there. But it starts with connections, and it's the people connections, it's the thought connections, it's the learning I got to do here in real time on the copper conundrum. That's relevant to the work I'm doing, and find it extraordinarily valuable. But I'm also doing work on women's leadership in science and innovation spaces, and so thinking about the AI-enabled connections and creativity and creation. I think that it's the melding of the platforms and the relationships that really we needed to come together in a room in order to have this experience. We couldn't have had the same experience.
Well, let's build on that, Mary Sue. So you're referring to an organization called Lincoln Road that you're leading with Ann Drake, the founder of Lincoln Road. Ann Drake has been with Twin many times and sends her love to all of us. Women in leadership roles. What's one thing you might take back to your colleagues at Lincoln Road from the session?
So we're about a year and a half out from having a physical home, which is being designed by architect Jeannie Gang. We're very excited, on the shores of Lake Geneva, which is about 90 miles from here. But we have international aspirations to create a place where women can be at the forefront of the creations and the innovations that our world needs. So it's not about women's leadership, it's about women leading. And leading change and leading solutions, leading breakthroughs. So I think that the need to tap technology tools to identify those cutting edge, eclectic minds has limitless potential. But it's important to not just get the engineers in a room together. It's the mix up. It's the mashup that makes it. I think that's where the magic comes from. So that, and then creating platforms, including ones that we can't even name today, to disseminate those learnings. Those are things that we're working on designing as we speak. So I look forward to any ideas or connections that sparks.
Great, thank you for that. And I want to underscore, it's hard to help somebody if you don't know what they're looking for. And when, especially, you're reaching across divides like industries or sectors or geographies, oftentimes we don't know that that person that's visiting from Singapore actually has the same problem we have. Or they have a different version of that problem, and we can learn a lot more by talking, by collaborating. And so that's why I really was excited for you to be here to say something about what Lincoln Road is up to. I'm going to take a wild guess. There'll be at least a few people here that become part of your tribe.
Absolutely.
Ingvar, what's something that's resonated with you?
A lot of things resonated, but I think when we heard about the Uncork presentation, there's something about when change is not just is accelerating fast. There's something about what remains constant, and I so often get surprised. I take myself off. I didn't see that one coming. So I kind of taught myself to not be surprised by me being surprised. Just seeking some kind of some kind of constant factor in that. And there's it struck me that when technology is becoming so much more sophisticated and advanced, that let's make sure we don't write a lot of code to make the world worse, and then rather reverse it and make writing code super easy. I think that's a really good example of democratizing tech. And coming from Norway, we like to have fun, but why shouldn't we rather democratize democracy? But I think democratizing tech makes sense. And also, I've heard you speak about proximity over the last 5 years or so, and I think it's been evolving, and it makes more and more sense. I think you started saying products and services. Now it's value creation across time and space, and it makes more and more sense. And I wouldn't be surprised that in 5 years' time we have an even more refined version of proximity. So. No.
I will not be surprised at all, in fact. I will be surprised if that's not the case. Jill, reactions, thoughts?
Yes, I was torn between two, but I'll save my second one for maybe a close. So one thing that I saw run through the sessions, and then so what's next, is this concept around UX or comfort of big societal stuff, right? So Gary got up today, and he talked about, one of his most salient things is this idea of being able to do it yourself and being comfortable. And then Sam talked about getting the good guys, however you define them, getting the good guys comfortable, right? And then even when Peter jumped up, did you see it in his, which is that message of, you talk about chips, versus copper. People freak out about chips. No one's comfortable with the copper conversation. And so I started thinking about getting people really comfortable, and should we focus on that? But then I remember what Sam said about this difference between something being realistic, we understand it, it's comfortable. I'm thinking of my private equity days. Yeah, that makes sense. That's realistic. That's cybersecurity thing you just pitched me. But Sam said it might not be accurate. So what I think I'm going to leave with a so what is I think the speed of what's accurate, the speed of accuracy is changing. And so then how do all of us do something with that next? And it just made me think, how are you setting yourselves up for success, for the speed of accuracy? Are you talking to these great academics and researchers deep in their labs to see what's coming? But I think that's the message that I would leave with.
Great. So, John, I left you for last for this first provocation because, you just were working. So,
yeah,
what's up?
I probably showed my cards on what my answer was going to be. But I want to sort of connect this last point to also something that Sam talked about actually yesterday in the breakout that I really was thinking about during his talk this morning as well. And that is that, and again, I spend my life with board members and executives, people fundamentally who are lay people, who are the decision makers in our universe on this topic, have no idea whatsoever how this stuff works, right? I realized a year into sort of ChatGPT's reign, we still had people who were thinking that it was a really fancy search engine, right? It's not a search engine. It's a sentence completer. It's a code completer. It's going to come up with an answer even if it doesn't know what it is. So when it hallucinates, you really have to understand what that is, right? We somehow have to find a way of bridging the divide of our decision makers in our society who fundamentally don't know how this stuff works, who are not technologists, who don't even really care about the technology, with the technologists who, as many, many people have said today, need to have a greater understanding truly of the human impact of this stuff, right? Of those qualitative skill sets, of sort of the different elements of the human condition, which we also talked about this morning. I think the next couple years and how we do that or don't do that, and many speakers talked about this, is going to be the difference between whether we make this a platform and a tool that truly enables us to better our businesses, better our governments, better our societies, or ones we'll really be regret creating, right? It can go either way. I've heard that 10 or 15 times in the last 24 hours, and I think it's really time to decide. We better make it go the right way.
Yeah, I want to add to that. I really liked Rajiv's comment about speculation. People roll their eyes, say, oh my gosh, everybody lost all this money during the dot-com boom. See, I told you no one would ever, buy shoes online. Do you remember that? Everybody said, well, you can buy books because you know what you're getting. CDs, remember those? You know what you're getting, but no one's ever going to buy shoes online. And then, of course, what happened? Everybody's buying shoes online. Somebody figured it out. And we're going through this a similar cycle now. I didn't talk much about Lightspeed, the car with the solar panels on top. It's not working. They've gone bankrupt twice. And then people say, oh, see, I told you that's not going to work. And then, somebody figures it out and makes it work. So I want to add to the speculation notion, which there's a great value. I'm so thankful to Mark Zuckerberg for blowing $4.5 billion on virtual reality a few years ago. Because, he spent his share owners' money. He didn't have to spend my money. And he advanced the field and to his credit, he adjusted fast. And he came back and said, well, this isn't working. Let's do this other thing. But that's not off the table. That's coming, and they're spending a lot of money on it. So in addition to the speculation, I totally agree with the notion that we've heard many times that, we really need to get the good guys, let's say good people. We need to get the good people in, and we also need to have more people thinking about the social implications, the human implications of technology. Absolutely. But I'd like to add a little realism to this. What we're never going to be able to do is say all the great people working on cool, exciting technology and applications in the world and get them in a school and in a seat and convince them they've got to spend a lot of time thinking about humans and thinking about what's best for the planet. We want to get more and more people doing that. We want to do our darndest to get as many of those people with power and insight to consider those factors, but we have to be realistic and know there are going to be a lot of people who just aren't going to. And you know what? If we set up the social systems and the governmental contextual factors, we'll actually be able to benefit from all these people trying lots of new stuff, even if they're totally agnostic to what it really means. And that is going to happen. That is happening right now. It's always happened. It's going to continue to happen. So we have to figure out, with the assumption that that is happening, what are the other things that the good people can do to help to make the world better. So I'm going to actually open it to the audience in a minute to say, anybody have a quick observation, emphasis on the word quick, or insight, something that struck you, that resonated, that you're surprised about? I'm going to come back to the audience in a minute. But before I do that, I want to ask our panelists, what's one thing that you might consider doing as a result of your experience the last day or day and a half at Twin Proximity? What's one thing you said, gee, it occurs to me I need to do X? Jill, you're nodding your head.
I am. Encourage people to spend as much time learning about brains and this power, would you call it the addition? When we understand our own brains, that we're spending talking about AI.
Understand brains. Okay, discover they have brains. That's another thing that we can do. Who else? Something that you're going to do?
I think I'm probably going to go back and have my entire workforce learn how to use Uncork.
Whoa. Okay.
Because we do a lot of work in transformation and change management, often alongside tech companies doing major tech implementations that take years and years and years. And that is sunsetting. That is sunsetting.
What do you mean it's sunsetting?
We're working alongside enterprise tech companies that build software solutions that take years to implement across the enterprise, that then take, this is often underappreciated, years to maintain and update and, like push out different, updates that then have to have custom solutions on top of that. And it's just the manpower and effort that takes versus being able to build something in a weekend that could be that enterprise solution that then can be updated by less tech-savvy people a lot faster. Wild.
And it's going to take a while to figure out what that means and how it works.
Mm-hmm.
So I love your idea. And Gary, you heard it. His whole team needs to be using this stuff. All right. A couple of observations from you. And I'm going to encourage some people who haven't spoken, haven't been speakers. You've been hopefully paying attention. Anybody who has something that's resonated, yes. Somebody who hasn't been a speaker yet at all. Yes. Oh, here.
Thank you. I love projecting, but I'll cope with the microphone. My grandfather would say, a bad craftsperson blames their tools. And we've spent a lot of time cogitating on how we can use generative AI and any other AI to solve the challenges caused for humanity by having the tool. But as Jill just said, learning how to use our own minds. We're never going to understand how to get these machines and these tools to be creative until we understand how to be. And we've created a situation where we have a catastrophe coming for the next generation because we're not teaching them to think well.
Great. So let me add to that. We need to become better at understanding how to use our minds because lots of other people are figuring out how to use our minds.
Yeah.
So who else, who hasn't spoken, who hasn't had a chance to be at the dais, can we get a microphone back there or do we have one? We don't. I'm going to walk all the way back there.
I wasn't expecting the most hopeful statement to involve Taylor Swift, but after everything we went through, what was really most interesting to me is the idea that in the face of so much technology and innovation, it's still about relationships, that we're still in this place where as those skills that were put up on the board, those are social skills, those are emotional skills, those are human skills. So somehow this whole conversation is still about how we're growing as human beings, how we're growing as people in relationship to each other rather than just technology. As if in the face of technology that we're talking about destroying us, what we're really doing is finding ways to come back together after technology and the pandemic and the world has changed so fundamentally. And that really did leave me with a great sense of hope after so much kind of doom and gloom. And I left feeling much better. So thank you.
Thank you.
That's what we hope.
Fantastic, Jesse. Thank you. And Jesse's somebody who helps a lot of people feel a lot better in the work that he does. So please meet Jesse. Somebody else who hasn't had the floor at all, who has an observation or a thought. Yes, I'm okay. I feel like Phil Donahue. Is anybody else old enough to know who Phil Donahue was?
So I keep going. Sure. My name's Shruti Balakrishnan, and I'm part of the Northern Trust Asset Management Group. I keep going back to something Christian Hammond said yesterday, which was, you can't be an AI for as long as I have without believing that all aspects of human cognition can be converted into the machine, some version of that. I've been going back to that and thinking about, do I believe that? And I'm not sure yet, but what it has told me is, what I'm taking away, especially after listening to all these folks, is you can't be complacent. You really can't sit back and say, well, what I do is unique. What I do can't be replicated or changed. And that's a reflection I'm taking away with me.
I love that, Shruti. A lot of people say, how do we make AI be more like humans? First of all, what a horrible idea. Do we really need, we already have 8 billion, do we really need 100 billion more? But that is the effort, because this is the context we have. This is the guidepost we have. But I think rather than how do we make AI more like humans, AI confronts us with ourselves. And it asks us the question, it provokes the question, what kind of humans do you want to become? So it's really more about that. So back to the panel, what's a thought that you haven't heard that has occurred to you that you would like to share with the group to carry them off into the universe to make this world a better place? John.
You know, and I was actually thinking about this also related to your last question, because it's related to like one thing that I'm going to do over the next year in addition to what I've said. You know, it's interesting just thinking about the arc of history here in my own history. You know, I remember moving into my dorm at Northwestern in 1986, and there was a computer lab in the basement. And our dorm was one of the few dorms with computer labs because it had been privately funded. Some alum who liked our residential college donated 3 Macs, and we had a computer lab. By the end of school in 90, the goal of the school was to have every student have access to a computer, not even owning a computer, just having access to a computer. Every dorm had a computer lab. I think by 92, everyone had a computer, right? When I graduated from Kellogg in 2000, the goal was to have everyone having internet, right? So we went from having computers anywhere on campus to everyone having their own computer to then internet. And now, as my son graduates from Northwestern with a degree in computer engineering, the goal is to have everybody have AI, right? I think we all know, and by the way, he's a technologist who keeps texting me throughout the day, you have to talk more about the social issues. You have to talk more about the social issues, right? This was the president of Northwestern Robotics Club, right? To me, I think we have to think about those social issues, but one of the things that I've been a little bit confused about, Rob, over the past couple of years is, again, from a governance perspective, and maybe it's because Harry is sitting in front of me here, I'm just thinking about governance here, but I have been frustrated that I don't have access to the decision makers in the world to do this. And I realize I do have access. I still don't know how to help them get down the curve quickly, right? This is happening fast, right? And I realize looking around the room, we all have access to decision makers, right? And if we can figure out a way to talk to the decision makers from a governance perspective and help them understand what they need to do, we got a shot. So that's what I'm going to do this year. In addition to this thing with Kayun on the human condition, I'm going to focus on governance because I think that is just super important for this.
And that sounds like a job for Twin.
I think it does.
Let's do it together. Yeah.
No coincidence.
Mary Sue, and then we'll go Mary Sue, Ingvar, Jill, down the line. Mary Sue.
I'm reflecting on what Jill said earlier about neuroscience.
Yeah.
And what I take away from this gathering and will bring into my work. You mentioned, Rob, that the philanthropist I'm Twin couldn't be here today, but her career was in the supply chain sector. And I think about that, kind of deconstructing a problem and creating a new solution goes to making sure that we bring brain science into it, but we also would have had a very different meeting if we hadn't had music and art in this meeting. So I think it's very important to bring that to the, whether it's a shared love, which I discovered with Bill, of Rodgers and Hammerstein, or take a variety of forms. But that is part of the process of invention and creation and breakthroughs just as much as anything else.
Well, anyone who's been with Twin for a while knows that I don't think there's ever been a Twin event where we haven't had the arts front and center in some way. And I hope to think woven into the program. Briefly, William, briefly?
One of the great lessons in life is balancing the opposing polarities. In a micro-macro way, we have to balance the mind and the heart, and we have to balance technology with the gift of the arts, music, literature, painting, philosophy, which give us our humanity. AI as a tool, let's use it wisely and in perspective.
Great, thank you. Spoken like a true artist, Ingvar.
Yeah, so last night at the Harris Theater, I actually had an epiphany because we talked about democratizing technology, but we're probably in a generation where we're also democratizing intelligence. And
boy, I hope so.
Yeah, meaning it becomes a commodity. But yesterday, being a saxophone player, obviously, I always appreciate Jeffrey and a wonderful duet on Pure Imagination. But perhaps even more so, William, your duet, so to speak, with AI, because I just didn't see it coming. And it just struck me as something surprising and beautiful. And when it's not always about using AI for getting what you want, but more like what you need, and you don't always know that. And I think that's like I discovered that yesterday, and also maybe that's perhaps the only. You just talk about value creation in across time and space in as part of proximity. And maybe the ultimate value creation is actually emotions, because that's something that we're left with as maybe the only superpower we as human beings are left with. And I saw it again this morning with putting the roast on the moon. I was like, yeah, so thank you again, Barbara.
Well, by the way, a good friend and Twinian K.K. Raghava, an Indian artist, you can look him up, has been doing a series of mapping brain activity during various experiences of joy, of fear, of anger, of, to be honest, orgasms. And then he turns those into pieces of art. What he's suggesting, though, is not just this notion of a visual piece of art. He's actually, he believes, foreshadowing a not distant future where we'll be able to package up emotional states and share those like modules. You'll be able to have your own emotional playlist that we will be able to share. And this is K.K. Raghava's vision, and it's actually quite compelling. Jill.
It's very cool.
Yes, and scary as hell.
So much of my work is focused around making innovation actually happen. So I'm focused on picturing you, or all of us together, May 30th, 2025. And so I'm thinking about all the great things that we've made happen, from everything that you've afforded us the opportunity to absorb and experience. But so much comes at us, right? We consume so much content, not just here, but in life. And that's fine. But for us to make stuff happen, I hate to take us to a really tactical level, but I'm going to go even more tactical than you did. You gave us a great idea of what we could do. Tactical. What would I leave you with? I'd leave you with a few moments before you leave this room. Write something down. At a moment in the future, whether it's tomorrow, a week from now, a month from now, what you're going to do to help go from concept to creation, from all the stuff you heard to something you want to do. So when you leave and you get back to life, you have any hope of doing the amount of things that you had hoped to do in this room today.
By the way, we have a perfect opportunity for that. Following this segment, we're being invited to lunch on Northern Trust. Again, a huge thanks to our friends and colleagues at Northern Trust. There's no program for the lunch. That's on purpose. That's not, oh, I got to run to a meeting. I got to go to the air. Do your best to be here. Find some people to have a conversation with and do that. Write down, here's something I'm thinking about doing, and then share it with your colleagues at the table.
If you actually do it, and if you actually put it in your calendar, please send me a note. You can just find me on LinkedIn or somehow their way. I'll give you my cell. Like, tell me if you did it. It would make me very happy.
And not only that, Jill is a master at this. In Twin, we say never leave serendipity to chance. And just to illustrate, one day, maybe 6 years ago, I got an email from Jill. You copied this guy, Kai-Han Krippendorf. By the way, I couldn't even figure out how to say his name. And she said, the two of you haven't met. You need to meet. I don't know why. See what happens. And that eventually became the book. And that was Jill. So thank you. Caleb.
I guess the thing I would want us to leave with is I was struck by the definition of proximity as being, digital pushing value creation closer to the moment of demand. Because I feel like we're in a moment where we aren't very in proximity to each other. Like, we are a lot more disconnected socially than we've ever been, while being sold that we're actually being more connected. We're being told that social media connects us. We're being told that dating apps bring us together. We're being told that, we're sharing a reality in a lot of ways, when actually there are tech companies making editorial decisions for us about all of those things and trying to present them as neutral arbiters of the truth. And we've been kind of sold a bill of goods, and I want us to understand that like the truth is knowable and empirically provable, and AI is going to bring that to life without respecting the socially constructed nature of reality. I'm also a fan of brain science, and a lot of what we believe to be true is culturally and socially constructed. And so if we're going to build AI tools on top of that, we have to understand whose reality we're buying into. And I think that's an important social responsibility that we all have to take away from if we're going to build tech for the next generation.
And John, you already had here's what we should do. So I'm going to conclude now, but I want to probe that a little bit, Caleb. It's profound. There's a lot in that. I agree. First of all, the notion of we're falling apart, even though somehow we're technologically brought together. To me, that the place to start would say, what is the value we're seeking to create? What is the value for each of us as individuals, as communities, as societies, as humanity? And when you get deep on the value, then you can start to come up with solutions that actually will bring us, whoever that means, together. Now, you also made another assertion, which I actually used to believe, and I don't believe anymore. And that is that reality is empirical, and we can verify it, and we know what's really real, as Plato asked thousands of years ago. I'm actually going closer and closer to the position of the great American pragmatist philosopher Richard Rorty. If you haven't read any Rorty, he died in 2007. And the ultimate summary of his life's work was a beautiful small book of lectures called Philosophy as Poetry. And at the consternation of all of his colleagues in the field of philosophy, he actually meant philosophy is poetry. He didn't mean it, let's do it like poetry. No, he meant all this stuff you're doing. Now, he's not talking about justice. He's not talking about legal philosophy. He's not talking about political science. He's talking about epistemology. How do we know things? He's talking about metaphysics. And he says, you can believe it if you want, and it's a wonderful thing, but it's poetry. And poetry is a great thing. And he said this one thing. Think about where we are today with social media and our echo chambers and fake news and all this. He said this one thing that comes to mind every day now for me. Truth is what you can get away with saying. Truth is what you can get away with saying. As we near the post-virtual world, this will become poignant. And when the world of pure imagination, when literally anything is possible, then what will be that bedrock of truth? I'll point out on a grand scale, John Bremen, my longtime friend and visionary in his field, he's talking today about the arc of history. I've been tracking the last 3 or 4 years since we merged as societies out of COVID, and I've heard more and more what would have been considered hyperbolic comments like that before COVID being shared in forums like this, and people don't find them as hyperbolic anymore. That's because we are feeling the arc of history. And hopefully in that arc, we can bridge the divides. Hopefully in that arc, your son Jackson and all of his colleagues at the rising generation can do a lot better than we have done so far. Ingvar, you talked about democratizing intelligence. Well, there are lots of kinds of intelligence. We have the opportunity to bring a lot of those to really everyone on the planet. But then we've got to up our game. It confronts us with what kind of humans do we want to become? What kind of society do we want to create? Now we have more and better tools, additive tools, to do things we could never have actually done before. And Ingvar, I love your advice, not being surprised by being surprised. But note that Ingvar did not say, do not be surprised. He said, don't be surprised by being surprised, because thankfully, thanks be to God, it will happen more and more often. Because isn't there anything more wonderful than a wonderful surprise, or even a challenging surprise? Because it is through the challenges that we grow. You know what Caleb said, this is sunsetting. Did you feel a lot of things in your life that have been important, that have been essential, that have been meaningful, that feel like they might be sunsetting, that feel like it might be the beginning of that end? Well, that means there are beginnings of new beginnings. And we got a lot of problems to fix that have been created by tech in the past, and we're building on top of that. That's not a great foundation. So let's all call Gary Hoberman and make sure that we start from scratch. Mary Sue said it right. That's why she's here. That's why I'm so thankful to be here with all of you. You've all been invited because you have so much to give. That cutting-edge eclectic minds, bringing cutting-edge eclectic minds into the room together, especially when you have free drinks and food. And you also said, Mary Sue, it's the mashup that creates the magic. That word magic keeps coming back. That word magic we experienced last night with William and Jeffrey and all. And Jill, of course, you created some magic when you brought good people together. I know Kaihan is. I'd like to think from time to time I am as well. So I encourage you at lunch to write something down. To conclude, I'd like to share a story and a quote. The story is in the book. It's one of my favorite stories in the history of literature and philosophy. I'm a big fan of dystopic literature. I didn't say I'm a fan of dystopias. I'm a fan of dystopic literature. And there's this beautiful story, you can find his letter online. When George Orwell finished 1984, he sent the manuscript to his former French tutor, Aldous Huxley. And he said, sir, what do you think of this? Huxley sent him a beautiful letter back. He said, Orwell, this is undoubtedly a masterpiece that will stand the test of time. But I think, this is Aldous Huxley saying, I think my vision of the dystopic future is far more likely to happen. Not the vision of a dystopia of a boot on the head, of constant monitoring of where every one of us is, not only in our bodies, but our minds and even our souls. But the oppression of pleasure, the oppression of fleeting pleasures, the oppression that says that if you feel anything but basic happiness, you must take a pill. Not you can take a pill, soma, you must take a pill. And if you look at these two dystopias, they represent the challenges on both sides of the spectrum we face in the planet, on the human planet right now. The last thought I want to leave you with is that this is a never-ending process. My favorite essay so far that I found in history is by Emerson. It's called Circles. You can find it online. It doesn't take that long to read, but you're going to end up reading it 4 or 5 times before you start to get some glimmer of what the heck he's talking about. And he said one of the things he was doing in Circles was trying to answer the assertions of many people in the mid-19th century, this was 1841, where scientists were saying, we're coming so close to knowing everything about the universe, to knowing physics, to knowing the body, to knowing everything about everything, and pretty soon we'll be done. And in Circles, he says, there is no enclosing wall. There is no circumference around us that limits man. He did use the word man. That limits man. The circles continue to be drawn wider and wider out to infinity. And it is we who must draw those circles, live within them. Thank you very much to all of our speakers, panelists, and to all of you for being with us here at Northern Trust. And thank you, the panelists. Let's all go have lunch.